Hi everyone, it's Chris Wataka with the SinglesNetwork.org Ministries. As some of you might know, I've started a new project called PrayForAmate.com. Last summer while I was working in England, I came across a lady that wanted to tell me her story regarding a prayer ministry that she started. She'd gone to her pastor, a pretty large church, and said, can we start a singles ministry? Because, one is that she wanted to make some friends, but also she wanted to get married, and heaven forbid you meet your spouse in church. Well, this pastor said, no, we're not going to do singles ministry. It's too hard. It requires too much work and too much money. And, singles, we don't commit and we come in and out of the church and it might even become a meat market. We don't want that to happen. And so she was very discouraged. And so she went back to her home and she got with some of her friends, including some married friends, and she started to pray. And she said, Lord, what can we do in order to be able to have a singles ministry, but maybe not call it a singles ministry? So she went back to her pastor and she said, Pastor, can we have a prayer group for people who want to get married? A prayer group for people who want to get married. Well, there was no single word in that title, which that was kind of interest to him. He said, well, of course we believe in prayer. We believe in marriage. Of course you can have a prayer group for people who want to get married. And I said to her, isn't that called a singles ministry? She goes, no, Chris, it's a prayer group for people who want to get married. And I just started to laugh and I said, okay, call it whatever you want to, because the reality is that 99.9%, I believe, of all single adults, those that are not married, would like to be married. And so she started the group, and I don't even know if she believed where it was going to become. It's a once a month group, and it's a 2-hour meeting. And so the first half hour is set up where there's a greeting time, a little icebreaker. There's maybe a 5-minute devotion on a different topic of struggle and things that we're dealing with in our fears and concerns of getting married. There might be a band that plays a couple songs, and then the topic starts. And for an hour and a half, they pray. And it's done in different kinds of ways, and you can go to the website and see all the different types of options and varieties that you can do. But the point, it's a prayer group. It's not a Bible study that you didn't squeeze in prayer. It's not a social outing that you didn't squeeze in prayer. But it's an hour and a half of prayer done in segments. The purpose behind it? Well, it could be to find a mate. And I asked her that. I said, how many weddings have you had that's come out of this? I mean, because she's had been doing it about 1.5 years. And she said, well, to be honest with you, Chris, we've only had about 5 or 6 at the time. I said, you've only had 5 or 6 weddings out of this large group? Oh, and by the way, I didn't tell you that the numbers had gotten to 200. She had 100 men and 100 women. Because what she had done was she made a sign-up list, and the only time women could come into the group is if she had enough men. And so out of 100 people, 100 men and 100 women, only 5 or 6 marriages. And she says, Chris, it's actually not really about marriage. I said, really? Well, what it's about? And she said, it's about healing. It's about restoration. It's about reconciliation. She said people came in saying, yes, I'm going to find my mate. And of course, the first meeting, they all were looking around looking for their mate. And then as they started to pray and people started getting real and getting honest with why they weren't married, because if you're such a great catch, if you're so amazing, then why aren't you married? I don't know. I get asked that question all the time. I mean, I can tell you for some, I know why they're not married. I mean, if you have debt up to your eyeballs, I can tell you you're not really a good catch. If you have low self-esteem or you have really hard ways of communicating and you're not a really good communicator, if you have some addictions, these are things that can definitely cause problems in relationships, even in friendships. But what about those that, well, I'm in church, I'm in a Bible study, I'm reading, I'm doing what God's told me to do, I'm serving, but yet God still hasn't brought me anybody. What's wrong with me? I don't know. Well, to be honest with you, I had to think about myself. Because I had always thought, the reason why I'm not married, it's God. I'm just going to serve the Lord in ministry. Yep, I'm going to just focus on Jesus. And then, if He designs me to be married, He will bring that fella along. And, of course, you can wait at home and wait for the FedEx man to come, and he may come. But no, the Lord says to get out and serve and do the work. But then again, I said, well, I am doing the work, just like other singles are doing the work. Then why? Well, what I loved about Pray for a Mate that was being done in London was that people were beginning to realize where the problems were. Just like myself, I said, well, you know what, maybe I need to also examine my own heart. So I love the idea. I came back to America, and it was so funny. I said to her, well, tell me, how do you keep people from coming that are just like looking, I'm looking. She said, Chris, it's a prayer group, and we pray for an hour and a half. They don't come back. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you're right. It eliminates all those people that are not serious. And what's the great thing about it is that most people want to be married, and those that are willing and want to be are willing to say they want to be married. You eliminate that right off the top. And then you can get at the core of things. Then you can start to really see what's going on in here. So I brought it back to America. I changed the name to Pray for a Mate. And of course the website is prayforamate.com. I restructured some things, made a few adjustments to make it more applicable to, I believe, to be planted everywhere. Since last year, I had to go through it, of course, myself, because I surely wouldn't expect anybody else to do it if I hadn't gone through it. I had decided that, it was definitely God that wanted me to not be married. And I had to write down my own answers to my own questions as, why am I not married? If I'm such a great catch, why am I not married? And my list started off this big, and it got this long and longer. Some of the things on there weren't realistic. I had fears about what would he be? What if he does this? And what if he does that? And had all these fears. And I'm going, oh my goodness. And I remember showing the list of my married friends, because you need married people in your life, single adults. You need to see what a marriage looks like. And I showed my list to my married friends, and they laughed. They said, Chris, the majority of that is fears of a man you haven't met. It's not realistic. Take them off. Some of them were real. They were real concerns. The reality is, I don't have a perfect past. I've made a lot of mistakes, and some of those mistakes continue on in my life. There are consequences to some of our mistakes, and those were fears. And then some of them, I needed counseling. I need help. I need someone that can listen and hear my heart and help me heal from the past. So last November, we decided to launch Pray for a Mate, and as of right now, we're nearly 200 different people have started or are starting ones around the world. Yes, around the world. Because single adults want to be married. And heaven forbid you meet someone in church. Pray for a Mate brings prayer back to the church and brings it back to the place that needs to be where we are. It brings us back into the church ourselves and puts the covering back over us so that our pastors and leaders get involved. What's great about Pray for a Mate, it doesn't have to be just singles. I've got 5 grandmas praying right now for their grandchildren. I've got a group of women in Pennsylvania that are inclusive, where they didn't want anybody else to be in their group because they wanted to deal with their hurts and pains of where they were now. I've got a group of teenagers in Oklahoma that said, we want to pray for our mate to be. So we're going to work on ourselves as God prepares us for one day. And then I've got groups where they're mixed, married and single. Because again, the model is there. Having married people, or those that were married, to be able to help single adults that haven't been married to be realistic is important. Here's the worst that can come out of it. It's 5 married grandmas praying and interceding. That's the minimal. That's the worst. That's the smallest fruit that would come out of it. But the biggest, it could be a way for our churches again to have singles ministry that meets once a month. And from there, what else can happen? The other 3 weeks, guys, the other 3 weeks you can have Bible study. You can have a boundaries Bible study. You can do divorce care. There's all kinds of other things that you can do when you're able to grow to get there. But the worst is if you just do once a month, look what can happen. I went back and I talked to the lady in England, and I just said, tell me more of the testimonials. And she said, Chris, people came in looking, and they found the Lord. People came in saying, oh, I just know if I meet somebody, I'll be happy. If I meet somebody, I'll be fixed. If I meet somebody, they'll complete me. But they realized they needed Jesus Christ. And she said, people, when we started praying, stuff just kept falling off of people. And then that was when their life changed. So yeah, pray for a mate. Yeah, I'd like to pray for a mate. I'd like to pray to help me to become a good mate. I'd like to pray to learn more about what it is to be married and what it is about the opposite sex. But ultimately, if I just grow closer to God, that's enough. And if I do it in the group of accountability and community, it's even better. So this is Chris Swataka with the singlesnetwork.org ministries and prayformate.com.